So this was from a photo of our dog, Patches. This kind of is photo, a fabric collage. So you can see, it's kind of like a quilt, ready, it's like a quilt front. And these are pieces of fabric cut to make the impression of flowers. That's about as abstract as I get. And then the butterfly, you can see, is pieces of fabric fused. So I've done several different kinds of that kind of thing. And this is one of the classes that I like to teach. Some of these techniques to people who like to make quilts or you can use it for a pillow or whatever. So I do a lot of birds. This is kind of, I just set them up in here because I enjoy seeing them. And I pick a breed and I think about their size and look at pictures to get their skeleton, kind of look at the shape of the beak and then build it up and then build the color. You can kind of see the start of some things, how you can build it up. This guy is, posable. So that's that wire armature, and then you can pose him. You can pose the ears. He could be frightened or alert. So I do the mice, kind of more cartoonish, different ones. So this guy's a hiker. So he's got his hiking stick and backpack with a surprise inside. Have the little tailor mouse, seamstress, whatever. So I enjoy doing those because it's this little handwork that you get to make the little clothes and things. It's really fun, I think. This is for a class I'm teaching. When I teach, I like to show people the steps. So we're going to have a class to make a little seated bird. So I have all the pieces prepared. I play with the colors, mix some colors to find the right thing. I look at a lot of pictures. The little puffy birds is what I was going for in this one, where they're in the winter. I don't think I was too worried about how things turned out when I was young. My mom taught me to sew. My grandmother taught me to crochet. And I was always just creating things, looking up how to do it in the library and then trying things. I've realized lately, I think part of it is the learning of it that I enjoy, the creativity. But there's something about losing track of time when you're working on something that's creative. That's, I think, what makes me come back always to doing something. So even though I was working, I was an art major, but I was a botany and art major, and then I ended up in graphic design. But all the time I was working in marketing and design, I was always had some kind of craft, different things over the years. Silk painting, batik, a lot of fiber type things, clay, just trying new things. And then as I got older, I kind of realized I like 3D, even though I do a lot of 2D things. I like working in 3D. So needle felting has been a good match there. And I like the fiber, the wool is, the colors are beautiful and it's warm to the touch and not too tough on your hands. So that's what I've been doing the last few years, and just the last 3 years doing that instead of working, whereas I was always doing it on the side of work before and giving them as gifts or donating them to auctions. And so when we made a major move, I decided to start doing it more and trying to market myself some. So it's been a change. It's been very validating in a way and fun.
What was that like, working and doing art at the same time?
You know, I went into graphic design because it is a creative field, but you have a client. So there was definitely creativity in the work, but in the end, you had a job to do with it. And so I think the things I was doing on the side were always something that was more free creative. So doing the creation just for the sake of creating, which is very different. And I think I'm finding that now, that balance of are you doing it for someone else or are you doing it for yourself? I think getting into the New Hampshire League of Craftsmen and selling through some galleries also did that in a different way. You know, you want to be good enough, whatever that means to you in your mind. So on one hand, getting into the league has freed me to say, you know, okay, I can do whatever I want then within that medium, and push it. So I'm kind of trying to be a little more, doing it for myself more. So, yeah, but it is different than always trying to monetize it.
What did it feel like when you weren't thinking about monetization at all? Because I always remember you doing things over the years that were really good, that you probably could have sold just objectively, but it seemed like the satisfaction wasn't necessarily in anything but the act of it.
Right, in the creating, and not even necessarily the end product, although you certainly think about the end product. You know, when you're doing crafts with kids, like for fun, your own kids or other kids, you realize a kid doesn't think about the end product a lot of the time. They really are doing the process and enjoying the creating, and that they call it flow now, I guess, that feeling of losing track of time, just working on something until you don't want to work on it anymore.
Do you feel like having kids around inspired some of what you're doing?
Oh, I'm sure it did. I helped a lot with the drama club. So we did costumes and props and things. And that was a fun way also to interact with older kids. And it was more project oriented, but also a lot of fun creativity in those groups where you would be making a certain costume or a certain weird hat for some character. Yeah, it was fun.
It seems like having some purpose for it helps.
It does help me to have some reason to do it. You know, I give a lot of stuff away as gifts. So that is a good reason to do it too. But the other good reason for me is to learn something. So if there's a technique or a new, you know, whatever tool that you want to learn, it's a really fun way to incorporate something new into your work. And the learning is fun. Yeah, and maybe that's a purpose. To learn is part of the purpose of a craft too.
Do you have an approach for learning?
You know, I've always been a self-motivated learner, and I can learn from written instructions. I remember my grandmother crocheted, my mom knitted, and I decided I would learn to tat. I don't know where I even saw tatting, and I got this little shuttle thing in a book from the library, and I just tried it till I got it. And I remember a couple of people saying, I can't believe you taught yourself to tat, but I don't know.
Is that like knitting?
It's lace making. You make these little circular tiny thread lace pieces, doilies or trim for a blouse or something back in the day. But I was always just reading how to do something and trying it. And of course, you know, craft classes and stuff over the years, different topics are all contribute. I think it builds on itself. So the more different disciplines, then all of a sudden you think, oh, that thing I did in silk painting, maybe I could use that on this, you know, mouse's outfit for a needle felting project or something. I think there's a lot of crossover. At least for me, there's a lot of crossover. I don't feel like a pure this or a pure that. There's a lot of latitude with whatever the subject matter is, that the medium. Yeah.
What kind of things do you find yourself repeating? Or
One thing I've learned about myself over the years, I am a detail person, and I will try to do abstract work, and it's really hard for me. Like, I think I'm going to do something just really abstract, but I like the detail, and I find that whatever the medium is, I return to detail. And after college, I did botanical illustration for a little while, and I remember thinking, this is way too detailed, but in reality, I always return to a lot of detail. And I don't know, I like some things to look realistic, and I don't know why that is too, but it pleases me. The aesthetic is nice. I don't expect it of anyone else, but when I'm doing it myself, I like that. So it's an interesting thing I've learned over the years. As much as I try to do something out of that, it always comes back to that.
how do you capture something? How do you get the detail? What are you looking at?
I look at color and texture. You can abstract it to get the position and the framing, and then zero in on the detail. Trying to catch a mood or a feeling if you can, like the lighting. Try to catch what is that moment when the light is a certain way in a certain place, or a certain expression on a person or an animal, or gesture in the case of a sculpture, where you might position it so that it's evoking a certain frozen moment.
How do you get into the creative state when you're about to start working?
I'm pretty organized. Like, sometimes I have kind of a general plan. Like, if I look at the coming week, I might say, I'm going to have a day where I make armatures, and I'll make a bunch. And that's not as creative, but it gets me in that sort of setting. So I'll spend the day, making little wire armatures for a bunch of different figures. And it kind of eases you into the more creative part. And then I just get in the zone. I love the wool and the colors, and they are inspiring. I look at a lot of pictures of real animals, and something that speaks to me, then I'll say, oh, I'd like to recreate that if I could, but it doesn't have to be exactly like that. And at some point you leave the photo behind and look at the object. For me, I don't try to match the photo, but I use the photo to start me and to motivate me. And then you leave the photo behind and you're looking at the object and saying, do you like it? Is it finished? You could keep going. Is it done? Do you want to replicate it and do another one? Or was it just fun to do the one and you probably won't do another one? Is it something you want to try to sell? Or maybe it took too much time and you would never feel like you got what it was really worth to sell it. So maybe it's a gift, or you just keep it for yourself. It's all those things for me in my mind. I've enjoyed teaching, which, I've always sort of taught, but not really. But I've been doing a lot more teaching, and I really enjoy that. And I think I'm a pretty good teacher in the sense that I try to have people learn the skill, but apply it the way they want to apply it. In other words, usually in needle felting, the classes are, we are going to make this object. But I try to give people latitude and say, this is just an exercise to learn the process. You don't have to make this object next time. You can make your own project. But now you know how to do the armature or how to start it. So
that seems to reflect your approach to learning the skill and applying it, as opposed to, this is the only thing I can make now.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes people just want to make that one object, and that's fine too. And so you do. But I hope that they learn some skill. When I teach, because the other thing I do is fabric collage, and I've been teaching that at like a quilting shop. And I try to instill in people that it doesn't have to look like the picture. It doesn't have to look like someone else's. That's the fun of it. You don't have to use the lines that are provided. They're a guide, but you can change it. And I love to see people who maybe don't see themselves as creative. They know they can quilt, but they're not comfortable going out of that. I love to see them hit that spot where they're in the groove and they're creating and confident. So that's been fun. And it's also sometimes it's not for everyone, and as a teacher you realize they're going to do this project and they probably won't do it again, and that's okay too. They tried something new and they'll take something from it to the next thing they do.
What do you feel like you gained from working in a different environment than what it might have been your passion per se? Do you feel like you took anything that you think about now?
I think it was a good career for me. I don't think I could have done fine arts as a career. I just don't think I am the right personality or was. I think what I loved about graphic design, advertising, publishing, that idea of starting and finishing things is important to me. It's very project oriented. So you had a project and then you finished that project and then you move to the next project. That's a good fit for me. And I do that now, with the needle felting especially. I'm making chipmunks this week. And so you make your chipmunks and you have a lot of fun with it. And then you move to the next project and there's closure. And so the career I had, marketing, graphic design, it had some creativity for sure. And was it always, fulfilling from a creative point of view? No, but it was more fulfilling than if I was just doing something really not creative. So it was a mix, but the fact that it was short-term projects that you could finish. And I freelanced for many years, and you finish that project and you bill it and you move on to the next one. That's good for me. I knew that early on.
What kind of things do you think you learned from your mom? Because she was a prolific crafter as well.
She was, but she was very humble in that she never talked about things being art. But she was an incredible seamstress and would combine patterns and, fit it to you. But we're going to make this shirt, but we're going to use this collar, but we want to make it this style. I mean, she was really good at that. But she didn't really think of it as a talent. I mean, she had learned it growing up. And knitting, incredible. Like, people would call her, "Can I bring my knitting over? I made a mistake somewhere. I dropped a stitch." And she would get it worked out for them and give it back to them. So she set me up sewing really early with her old sewing machine. And to watch her with the confidence to just change it probably had a huge impact, because I remember taking home ec in school and you made the project and you had to show each step, and that had its value. But my mom sewed very differently from that. She was, how do you want it to look? Let's adjust the pattern or combine these patterns to make it what you want, which was a very freeing kind of thought, really.
Yeah, very empowering.
Yeah. And I remember, we would see stuffed animals around, but I couldn't buy them maybe, at the time. And so I would think to myself, maybe I could make that. And it's funny thinking about it because, of course, they weren't plush. It was like whatever fabric we had. But I would try to figure out the pattern, like, how could you I remember trying to make this dolphin, a stuffed dolphin. It looked like a freakish thing by the end. But I was trying to figure out the shapes to sew it together. And then what a great exercise. And it kind of looked like it, but it was like crazy. But I didn't really care because it was fun to do it, and I stuffed it, and it was like a weird pillow thing, So I think she encouraged that because she was happy if you were busy. And she'd give you what you need to keep you busy, you know. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from doing things with your hands, whether it's, you know, craft or cooking or, you know, anything you're doing yourself. There's a level of confidence and dexterity and a crossover between a lot of things in life, I think. Not to get too heavy, but...
Well, what do you think?
Oh, I need a little time to think that one out, to say something meaningful, but you know, I think sometimes people grow up thinking they don't know how to do something, they can't do something. I think we all have it in us to do things. It may not come naturally, but the more you work on something, the better you get. I sometimes am really sad if I hear someone say, oh, I'm really bad at art. And I say, well, what do you mean? And they'll say, well, I can't draw. I'll say, well, when was the last time that you drew something? And they'll say, like, second grade. And it's like, well, you probably draw like a second grader. That doesn't mean you can't draw. It means you haven't developed it. Maybe not everyone has the aptitude, but I think you can get pretty far if you concentrate on something. Maybe that's a Pollyanna kind of sounding thing, but I think we're all pretty capable of a lot if we really applied and had the drive or the interest or out of necessity, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of teaching about you either have it or you don't, you know?
Right.
Fixed,
Yeah.
what they call the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like, with your example, they did 1 hour of drawing. But just imagine if they did even 100.
If you like to do it, you do it a lot, you get better. You read about it, you get even better. You have some classes, then you learn some, you know, techniques and things. So I think that's true of so many subjects. You like to cook, maybe you like to eat first, so then you learn to cook some things you like, and then you read about it and you learn more and you collect information and the tools and it's a lot of crossover, I think, to a lot of parts of your life. You know, in business it's hard because things have to get done and you can't keep creating, but you need creativity even in a business setting as well. So I think there's a lot of room for creativity in things that aren't art, but it's tricky finding the right match for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've run into that a lot, where it's like you have these creative ideas, but then they're not received. And so then you kind of are like, well, this isn't the place.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is tough, you know?
It can
So
be really tough.
You have to look elsewhere for the creativity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I've done through my whole life. I enjoyed school, but I always was doing something else too, you know, on the side at home, making something or building something or, you know, reading about making something or whatever it was to get that feeling. Because maybe at school I enjoyed projects that let you be creative, you know, if you had a thing in history where you got to do the maps or something, you could really go after it. But and in work too, you know, you can have a creative job, but it's still a job. So you might have things on the side that you enjoy that are more open-ended. For me, that's what I've pretty much always done. Yeah.
How would you deal with those type of situations when they'd come up in a work situation where you had an idea and it got kind of crushed? But how would you reconcile that?
Well, I learned along the way, ideation is one of my, it's a gift if it's in the right circumstance, and it's a curse if not, because even once an idea is settled on, I still have more ideas. So I had to self-edit and say, okay, this is what we decided. Turn that off, because there's always more. There's more ideas. Even after you've decided what you're doing, you might say, or wait, we could do this instead. It's too late. You have to move forward. You can't just keep coming up with ideas. So I learned to curb some of that at the work setting, and also to do some of that in advance and not try to show everyone that, because not everyone appreciates that. They see it as indecision. When I was in a leadership type position, I quickly realized, okay, they need to see me as decisive and a leader. So I'll do that process, and then if I want people to feel included in that process, we'll maybe have a menu of ideas to talk about, but not really generating more and more and more, which overwhelms a lot of people. You see people very frustrated in their job if it's not a good fit. We don't always have the luxury of changing just because it's not a good fit. You know, you need to have a job and you need to work. I've been lucky, I think, that with the job I had for many years, and it changed, which was nice to get that variety, but it was always, you know, graphic design, some illustration, marketing, advertising, publishing. So you're learning, which I like to do, and it's projects, which I like. So I feel pretty lucky to have found that, and it was kind of purposeful. In college, you know, I was like, what am I going to do after I graduate? And I had done an internship in illustration, and then I did an internship in graphic design, and I realized quickly, this is a good match for me. I like the work. I like working with text and images. I think I'm okay at it. I'm pretty good at it. It uses a lot of design skills. It is project-oriented, so you know, you're working with people. I like people. You're working with people. You're working with other creative people. But it's also business, and I think I'm okay at business. So, you know, you're working with business people. So I feel lucky that I fell into it or ended up in it.
Well, I did want to thank you on camera for raising me and Elise
Aww.
with creativity.
Yeah.
Because I think it's benefited us a lot.
Well, I think both of you have a lot of creativity to be developed, obviously, and a lot of intellect, and, you know, each person has their own personalities, and I'm really proud of both of you.
Thank you.